Hi folks, this is Chris Kroll. This is the Game Design webinar. Today, February 2015, we have Monetizing from day one with our guest Ethan Levy. Ethan is going to be presenting on this topic next month at GDC, so we're getting a sneak preview, which I'm really happy about. I apologize for my voice. I'm working with a cold today and flying on cold medicine, so I can't be held responsible for what I might say. A little bit about me. I'm the ongoing host. I'm a creative director, game designer. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm a little bit of an oddball. And today we have Ethan Levy. Ethan is a 12-year veteran game designer and a producer who has shipped 50 games, right? That's huge. He's worked at lots of companies like Pandemic, EA, and BioWare and Playfirst. And he is FamousAspect, who you may be aware of from Reddit and other places. And he is a monetization design specialist. So I'm going to get out of the way and turn this over to him. And let's see here. I'm going to hit the buttons, which is what I do. That's my main job. I'm making him the presenter. And there we go. Ethan, it's handed off to you. And everybody in the audience, please feel free to chime in and type your questions in, and I will field those, and we'll work them into the conversation today.
All right. Ready to get started. Do you see my slides full screen?
I do. Got it full screen.
Well, you see my slides.
I do.
So I'll get started. As Chris said, my name is Ethan Levy. For the past 3 years, I have worked as a monetization design consultant. You may know me from my writings on Gama Sutra, Reddit, Pocket Gamer, the occasional Kotaku article. But for the past 3 years, I have been focusing on game monetization. I've been designing and producing games for over 12 years, and in that time I've contributed to over 50 titles and worked with, in the past 3 years, 45 clients to date. The majority of my games that I've contributed to are mobile free-to-play, but I have worked on every platform. Here are some of the games that I've worked on in the past 3 years. Not featured here are, in the past 2 months, I've worked with some of the biggest game publishers in the world on some of the biggest console games in the world on monetization design, but that's kind of all I can say about that. But I've worked on pretty much every platform, every genre, the whole gamut from hyper-casual games to core-focused 3D shooters. So the talk that I'm going to give today, first I want to start out by talking about my motivation for giving it. And the key thing is that I want to help game developers, especially smaller game developers, who are the majority of people that I talk to or work with are probably in 1, 3, maybe 8-person teams. I do work with large companies, but I would say that, especially given where the industry is right now, you work with there are a lot more small companies and small shops than large shops, especially in mobile free-to-play. And one of the critical issues that I've found in those past 3 years is that the companies do not approach the monetization aspect of their games design early enough. And that leads to kind of critical flaws in the game's design. So what does that look like? Somewhere along the line, someone has a bright idea and says, hey, let's make a free-to-play game. And then, the team designs it and develops it, and, maybe they get to alpha, and they're getting close to release. And then what has happened a number of times is someone on the team says, hey, I have concerns about our monetization. I don't know how this thing is going to make money I'm playing the build, it doesn't feel right. Or maybe they just saw one of my articles and they thought they'd want to talk to me. And So then they email me and they ask me for a report, and you know, we do a contract and I write up a report and I send it to them, and it's like, hey, you know, here are my suggestions, here are the strengths and weaknesses of your game and all the ways that I think you need to improve it to make monetization better. And they get back to me and they're like, oh man, this report is great. We love it. We love everything in it, but unfortunately we can't do anything. We're launching next week, or we're launching tomorrow. And the issue is, you know, that they instead of approaching their monetization design right at the beginning, they only focused on it way too late, and then, you know, they go to me as the expert, or many times they don't, but, you know, it's something that has to be integrated at the very beginning of your game's design, because it's really, and I've been harping on this for a long time publicly, like, it's the merger of game design and business design that leads to a successful product. So my goal today is to give you a couple tangible tools and tangible thought processes to help you approach the game design earlier in the process. This is kind of an in-development version of the talk, so, you know, if you check back with me in a couple weeks, maybe on in March after GDC, there will be a full version of this talk with more templates. Right today I have just one template to share with you. But I'm going to go through 4 different topics. So the first is going to be about forecasting and why you should forecast and why you should use a multiple case forecast. The second section is going to be about what some of the deliverables you should have in pre-production are. The third is going to be on prototyping your business model, why you should do it, and what that would look like. And the fourth is going to be just kind of a high-level concept about something I'm calling the in-context game design document. Okay, so first I'll go to multiple case forecasting. Let me see. I'm posting something in chat that I want to go to everyone. Oh no, that's just, Chris, how do I get it to everybody? Do you know?
That looks like it worked.
Okay. Got
Yep,
it.
there you go.
Okay.
Oh, Tristan, yeah, forwarded it. Great.
Excellent. Thank you, Tristan. So that is a link to a Google Doc that I'll be talking about for a minute. That is a template I've made for anyone to use freely to forecast their game revenue. So first, let me talk about a quick story about a game called Shattered Planet. It's a game I like a lot, and I've played on iPhone, and I own it on Steam. It's by a company, Kitfox Games. And
whoops. Did we end? Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Okay. And so Shattered Planet is a single-player, procedurally generated roguelike RPG. It's a lot of fun. And when it was released, it was featured on the iOS store. And on their Twitter, they announced within 4 days they hit 100,000 downloads. And then a couple days or weeks later, it was featured on the Android store as well. And within the first 2 months, Kitfox announced that they had over 300,000 downloads. And I think, you know, short of getting the editor's feature, getting featured in Best New Games on both the iOS and Android stores are kind of the best that many of us can hope for. That's the big free downloading, big free marketing that drives hundreds of thousands of downloads, in this case 300,000 downloads in 2 months. And I think a lot of us go into it thinking if we can only hit that download level, you know, if we can get that feature, we'll be a big success. And then here we are in an article from July of last year with Tanya from Kitfox Games, and the title is "When Free-to-Play Isn't the Best Option." So in the article, one of the key quotes was, "The studio made as much on Steam in 1 day as it had on mobile in 2 months." and this was a reaction to after the mobile launch as a free-to-play game. They launched as a premium price game on Steam. I believe it was $15. And in the first week, they announced in a blog post that Shattered Planet sold 2,500 copies on Steam. So 2,500 copies on Steam at $15 made more, and that's in the first week. So let's assume that half those are on day one. So like 1,250 sales on Steam, they made more money than they made from 300,000 downloads in 2 months on the iOS and Android store with the free-to-play version of their game. Now, one interpretation of that is that a single-player focused roguelike RPG is maybe a better fit for the premium model than it is for the free-to-play model. But the other reason that I wanted to bring that story up is that, you know, I think it's easy to look out at the marketplace of ideas and all the stuff that's put out there and only see the success cases, only see, you know, Monument Valley made $6 million or Clash of Clans is pulling in $5 million a day or whatever it is. It's easy to see those success cases and not really think about those unsuccessful cases that are the majority of games that are out there. And I'm not saying, obviously, I'm not saying that Shattered Planet is a failure financially. I have no idea what their finances are. I don't know if it is or is not a hit for them. It all, you know, success is also based on your investment. But I think that there is a lot of value from before you jump into designing your game to actually forecasting it and looking at multiple scenarios and thinking about what it will take for your game to be a hit. Now, I'm a game designer at heart and like a product manager type person now as a consultant. I'm kind of like a cross between the two. And I know that if you're a small team and you don't have any of that product management experience, the idea of forecasting your revenue might seem really foreign or really, I don't know, like against the reasons why you went into game design. But I think it's a very valuable activity, especially if you have a template like the one I made and you can probably do it in an hour or two. Like there's no damage that's going to be done by taking 2 hours to forecast your game. Now, I've done a lot of financial forecasting in the past, especially in my role at EA, putting together a forecast on what, you know, games we were working on would look like. And forecasting is not a perfect tool. No financial model is perfect or even close to perfect. Something that you know, numbers you put on a spreadsheet 2 months before, you know, 6, 8, 9 months before it ever releases are not going to be realistic. But what I do think a model is useful for is for planning, and is for giving you an idea of the key metrics you need to hit in order for your game to be successful, and to also think about different levels of financial and time investment over the course of development and live operations, and how that might affect the design and how that might affect the quality of the final game. I also think it's important to confront all of your costs up front, not just have like a rough ballpark, but really think about the whole world of possible costs as well as possible revenues, and force you to confront the market reality. So the link is there in the chat. Oh, sorry. Before I go to that, what I was going to say, in the past, what I've done and what I know, so like my frustration is it's something I think in the most part I don't think people do at all. I think there's a lot of teams when you're looking at those small teams that don't do any sort of financial forecasting, but when they do, they only make one scenario, and that scenario is basically going to be this game is going to be a hit, and here are the numbers it's going to reach that are going to make it a hit. And most games aren't hits. The vast majority of games, I don't know how many, what if it's 150 or 200 apps uploaded to the App Store every day, and the vast majority of those are going to be financial failures. And I also find that if you're only, for me at least, if you're only making one financial model, it's basically an exercise in massaging the numbers in your spreadsheet until it shows you what you want it to show. And it's not really you don't really learn much from it. And as I said, it doesn't account for the role of different levels of investment. So if you follow the link, I put together a template. On the first page there's instructions on how to use it, but let me just tell you about some of the features of this forecast template and why I think it can be helpful for you. So the first thing is that it asks you to make 4 different forecasts, one for worst case scenario, break even, mild, moderate success, and hit. And in each forecast, it asks you to write a hypothesis, like what is going to happen that will make this forecast come true. So for your worst case scenario, it might be game does not get featured by Apple, no major cross promotion, no marketing spend, and is buggy at release, right? And if that's the case, what's going to happen with your finances? So you write that hypothesis, and then you the first step is to lay out what your development costs are going to be in headcount, contracting, office and equipment, marketing, user acquisition, and servers. Then it asks you to, and it's a month-by-month financial model, asking you to first lay out your operational cost on a month-by-month basis, and then also look at kind of your marketing cost as well as what you expect your user growth to be over time. And it splits out installed users versus veteran users and has separate churn rates for the two user types, and allows you to separate installs by the organic players that are going to come to your game, players that are going to come because of cross promotions or events you're running with other marketing events, and as well as setting a user acquisition budget and estimating a cost per install and saying how many users you're going to get. So first you do costs and users, and then the second step in a forecast is to forecast the conversion rates and how much people are going to spend. And then one thing that's very important in the modern market, where, I mean, obviously it's a hit-driven business and there are very few mega hits out there, is that for those smaller studios I talked to, incentivized video ads and static ads, advertising is actually a very meaningful part of their overall revenue, especially if you're doing the incentivized video ads and you're focusing on countries like the U.S. and Europe. Or Europe's not so great right now, or not as good. But if you have strong incentivized video ads in the U.S., you can get some really meaningful revenue out of those video ads. I think there was a story recently about how Crossy Bird did $1 million in revenue in incentivized video ads in their game. And what's really important, to go back to game design, is that there's a difference between those games that you open up and they shove video ads in your face, and the game that offers a video ad as a value proposition. Like, we designed this element of the game to be something you might want, and if you want it, take 30 seconds and watch a video. I think in Crossy Bird you get, I forget if you get coins or if you actually get pulls on the lever. But anyways, just this model asks you to think about both in-game purchases and video ads and static ads. And then you'll see on the bottom of each forecast it has a couple visuals, so it visualizes your monthly active user curve. And obviously this one looks pretty terrible, and the reason it looks terrible is that it's a worst-case scenario forecast for this game. And here a worst-case scenario forecast for this game is looking at 50,000 monthly active, 54,000 monthly active users at its peak. And I know that I know that I've actually worked on games that have had less than that. So even this worst case scenario that I forecast here in this spreadsheet is kind of can be rosy compared to the overall market. It also visualizes your revenue per month by source, and it visualizes your profit. And the reason it's important really to look at the visuals after you enter all the numbers is that it's easy to look at something like this and really kind of glaze over all the just numbers, but a visual will show you if anything really stands out as looking questionable. And then, as I said, it asks you to make 4 different scenarios: worst case, break even, modest profit, and runaway hit. And for each one, you've shown your investment and the expected lifetime revenue and the profit or loss. And then what it asks you to do, what it asks you to do is add a probability. How likely do I think each scenario is to come true? And so here, just as placeholder, I said, well, I think this game is 60% likely to be a total failure, 25% likely to break even, 14.5% to make a modest profit, and 0.5% of a chance of being a huge mega hit. And so what it does is it multiplies your profit by each one of those forecasts, and it gives you your overall what you can expect in the end, which is here I've forecast that the game will make $21,000. And so it's a much different look at what's going to happen than to just do this, to just say we're going to spend $1 million and we're going to make $5.8 million lifetime. It looks at all the different scenarios and forces you to kind of think about them more meaningfully. And then from that, that should drive your design decisions in some way around monetization, right? If you have said that you're going to make $1 million over 2 years in video advertising, then your game design better justify the ability to make $1 million in video ads over that lifetime. Similarly, if you have a game that says you're going to have your design should be different in a game that has 0.5% conversion rate and a low ARPU, but tens of millions of users. That's a much more casual game that's a success than a hardcore game that might have 300,000 or 400,000 users at peak, but has a 2% conversion rate and a really high ARPU. So, as I said, it's obviously you can manipulate a spreadsheet to show you anything you want it to show you, but if the tool is used right, it will lead to a number of questions that your game design must then go ahead and answer in order to be a success.
Ethan, let me jump in here with a question. Number one, this is an amazing tool. When I've done this similar exercises, I had 3 scenarios, right? I kind of had minimum success, what I think is likely, and then lightning strikes, and it's very much a thing there. So I never put in the actual. Well, my worst case, I kind of like my lower end was kind of a mashup between your 2 lower end things here. Mm-hmm. Specifically, the question I have is on the forecast probability. Mm-hmm. You've got a 60% for the worst case forecast. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering. I tend to be pretty optimistic. I love my game designs when I put them together, right? And so, how can a designer or producer be objective? Like, what are the methods, what are the best practices for being objective about coming up with those numbers? And I think earlier on you had said, well, we need to do this. You had it like a small checklist for each one of these. Like, I need to, if this doesn't work or this doesn't work or this doesn't work, do you sort of use that logic earlier on to translate to saying, like, yeah, you know what, probably I'm not going to get a cross promotion, so I'm likely to end up in this failure state. And then if you go through and set those things up in a to-do list and you get 1 or 2 of those things checked off, do you then come back in and update this to say, all right, we've just upped our chances of success?
Yeah. So I'll answer that in 2 parts. So the first is how to stay objective. So one thing that the forecast asks you to do is set a hypothesis for each case. And then on the far right, there's a justification column that I haven't filled out, but that asks you to tell the narrative. And I think something that I know when I've been in that meeting where someone shows a forecast and it's like, our game is going to go up. And on October 10th, we're going to get another 50,000 users or 100,000 players. And, I remember someone asking why. Why are we getting those players that date? Where are they coming from? I'm not seeing anything that tells me where it's coming from. And the reason is because it wasn't a story. It was like an exercise in generating false targets. So I think what's the right way to use this tool is to tell a story and then show that story in numbers, if that makes sense. And then, obviously, if you're making this tool is obviously aimed at games with a commercial intent. Not all games have a commercial intent. One of the games I released last year was an art game with no monetization components about it was using Flappy Bird to talk about going through a midlife crisis, right? So this tool has no relevance for that. But if you are a commercial game and you do have revenue goals, I think what's important is to be objective about what your strengths and weaknesses are. And so if you are the majority of game developers out there, your weaknesses probably look like doing your first free-to-play game. Your weaknesses might look like this: no existing relationship with Apple or Google, no existing audience to connect to, no partners to cross-promote with, or other games to cross-promote with from an existing audience, no user acquisition, no big marketing spend, and basically you're just throwing no license. So if you are in all 5 of those buckets, or I'll put a 6th one in, no publisher support, then your probability on the worst case or break-even forecast should be much more than 50%, basically. Just looking at those cases, because if you're in our modern crowded marketplace, if all those things are true, you're more likely to fail than not. And then, sorry, yeah, it's just being objective. Now, what was the second? Oh, the second question was about updating as you go. Right. So this tool would be most useful if, let's say, you spent two or 3 hours doing the first version of it on your first week, and then once a month as a team you updated it based on changes to game design, changes to investment, player tests, how things are coming along, business development, maybe you're having good meetings with Apple or Google or whatever. But if you updated it once a month based on the changing conditions and you kind of kept an archive over time, you might get a better view at what's going to happen. Cool. Any other questions on this?
I'm good, and nobody has typed anything in yet. Of course, audience members, this is a live event, so you have a real great opportunity to ask Ethan directly about questions for what you see here. Go ahead, Ethan. So
now I'll jump into the meat of the talk, which is about prototyping your business model. So this is intended. This is for me kind of a work in progress. But it's intended to really address that question and that problem area of how to focus on your business design from the very first week. So let me start with a quick story about a game called Fates Forever, which I think from the headlines resembles a pretty big success story, right? So it starts with the founders of Hammer and Chisel. Before Hammer and Chisel, they made a platform called OpenFate, and they sold it to Gree for $104 million. So it's a massive exit for the team. So already they're starting from success. And then some years later, the OpenFate founders' new project was announced. It was Fates Forever, and it was a beautiful-looking game, tablet-focused, trying to be the first to market with the tablet-focused MOBA. And it got massive, major coverage for a mobile game. And then, based off the strength of the founders and the press and charisma and the quality of the product and the value of the idea, they raised $8.2 million for their game, which is a huge raise. I spent a year and a half working on a startup that raised no money and went out of business, so I am extremely envious of someone who was able to raise $8.2 million. And the game came out, and it got Editor's Choice at launch. You can't do better. This is millions of dollars of free marketing. This is the story we're all hoping for, right? Make a great product, raise a bunch of money, get recognized by Apple, and on top of that, it's a great game. It got a lot of good reviews. It's not, everything up to there was worth it. And in the week of launch, looking just at the U.S., it was a top 10 game for most of the launch week based on the strength of that Editor's Choice in terms of downloads. So, and it peaked at number 5. So this is like, anyone who's watching it, this is like what you hope for. This is the dream scenario, right? Isn't that this is what that show on HBO, Silicon Valley, is all about. But, if you look at the grossing ranks, it maybe tells a different story, which is that during launch week in the U.S. it didn't break, or during launch month it didn't break into the top 150 grossing. And I don't believe it's broken in there to date. And, in my experience, if you have a game that doesn't hit a top 150 grossing in the launch month, when you get the most promotion from Apple you're ever going to get, that makes it unlikely that it's going to enter that chart at any point in the future, barring a couple kind of unicorn scenarios or a massive marketing spend. Why is it that I tell this story? Well, I have no idea from the outside what Fates Forever, what design decisions went into making the game and what their monetization strategy is. But if you play the game from an outsider perspective, it has the same business model as League of Legends and the same business model as Vainglory, and that's they sell characters once a week. And if you were to look at that business model and then look at what generally works on mobile. Now, obviously, they're trying to break new ground, and they have the success story in League of Legends. But what you walk away from that, basically, if you wrote out that monetization strategy and you forecast it, you're basically banking on extreme player engagement over a very long period of time that drives monetization. Because this is a game where, unlike the vast majority of mobile free-to-play games where there's plenty to buy, there are consumables, there's plenty to buy on day 1 of your journey or day 90 of your journey. This is a game, and there's reasons to present the player with the option to buy something, multiple sessions every session. This business model is based on extreme player engagement and basically presents you with the opportunity to buy something once a week. I had a hero I was using, I liked them a lot, they're out of rotation, and now I buy them. Right? It's got a proof case in League of Legends, but so far, looking at Fates Forever and Vainglory, it has yet to be proven on mobile. And it's my feeling from the outside that with a different monetization design, this could have been avoided, and with the kind of non-traditional methodology, this problem could have been spotted much earlier. So when I talk about game monetization, I have 2 main mantras. The first is that free-to-play is about a long-term relationship with your players, which is a way of saying that you have to value game quality and long-term player engagement over aggressiveness and short-term monetization. The second mantra is that you have to make purchasing present. And it's the intersect, those are two kind of ideas at opposition, and the art of monetization comes in finding the appropriate intersection of those two mantras for your game. So this whole setup leads me to the idea that you should prototype your business model. So why do I say that that's important?
You know what? Actually, Ethan, before we get into the next phase here, I'd like to catch up on the audience questions.
Sure.
And do that. Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this. Ches Zukowski asks, sorry for mangling your name. Are there good market research sites I can reference when inputting these numbers? It's hard to find out what is likely. Right. So where would you go to do market research?
Well, so the next step, I have privately a list of articles where people reveal their numbers, kind of like the Kit Fox one I talked about. And so I'm going to add a tab with links to articles that mostly on Gamasutra. That show these different numbers. In general, people, one, there's not a lot of sharing of data out there, and two, in the case of sharing, it's either extreme success or extreme failure. But if you look at those, I'll put in a list of resources for you in the future, in the near future, because there's no, unless you. I mean, I think App Annie Insights probably has a lot of that, but it's also behind a paywall, and I've never paid to get past that paywall. But I do look at App Annie a lot for just download ranks and grossing ranks. Not that that helps you with real numbers.
I could give you a sense of the state of the ocean. Yeah. Okay. Tiago Tex Pine asks.
Oh, hi, Tiago. We're friends on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Oh, very nice.
Congratulations on your new job. I saw that on LinkedIn the other day. Or a new job title.
Congrats, Tiago. What can game designers do about capital A acquisition, since usual design approaches such as Facebook, Twitter posts don't work at all? Meaning it is a given product managers need to get as many external partners as possible, but is there anything wise we can do within the game mechanics besides clans and friend leaderboards?
Right. So how can a designer design for acquisition? It's a great question, especially for the smaller you are and the less you can lean on a license or on other things. So assuming that posts to Facebook, as were common in the Zynga Farmville era of Farmville Mafia Wars level, those tactics don't work really. Spamming people with viral posts, in my experience, doesn't work anymore. So it is about, if you want to design for acquisition, you have to design unique features to your game that either drive word of mouth specifically, or drive some level of content creation. So something to think about is like Twitch or YouTube as acquisition channels, or maybe Pinterest or Instagram even. Like, how can a player create a video or image in your game that they will then want to share with other people? And I know what Camcord lets you record on mobile your playthroughs, and there's a new Unity bought someone that broadcast plays. But in general, what I would think about is how can I, if my design needs to focus on acquisition, what are the design features of my game that will allow someone to communicate out beyond the Facebook posts that we know don't work? And so going back into using that spreadsheet as a tool, the spreadsheet would lead to a list of questions your game's design must answer. And if one of those questions was, we need to drive organic growth for this game to be a success, you might want to think, well, what is the core video streaming feature of my game? Like, what's the video that people are going to want to share on YouTube, for instance? Cool.
Those are good, really good tips. The other thing that I've used in the past is hopefully it isn't evil, right? But there is that idea of designing a reward system for the player if they, when they bring like something when they bring a new player on board, that both of them benefit. And ideally, there's something that destroys the game balance, right? Like a lot of times you make it some sort of kind of fun aesthetic reward, or like in an MMO, the guild will benefit by having more people who are accruing more guild points over the course of the day. So everybody kind of benefits, and it has the possibility of being sort of a pyramid scheme, but if you're aware of that and you just sort of make it kind of nice to play with your friends, it gives people an incentive to bring their friends into the mix, which is another way, as opposed to pushing out to sharing, kind of keeping it. Which I completely agree with. The sharing outward is really powerful. Mm-hmm. My 2 cents. I'm out. Go ahead.
Okay, so back to why you should prototype your business model. Okay, so first let's look at what happens in the standard case. If you're used to making box games or you come from a box game background, the first thing you're going to do once you have your high concept in place is you're going to start prototyping your gameplay. And from a business standpoint, this makes lots of sense because in the box product world, if you have a fun game will drive reviews and word of mouth, and reviews and word of mouth lead to sales. Therefore, if fun equals sales, it's important to prove your game is fun first. Oh, I have a typo there. You have to prove your game is fun first in order to de-risk the project, right? But as we showed with that case of Fates Forever, you might have a fun game that drives reviews and word of mouth, and in the world of free-to-play, that'll drive downloads and retention. But you need a combination of both retention and features to drive sales. Players on their own won't make you any money, and in fact, they'll just cost you money in server costs. It's the monetization features that you need to focus on that turn into revenue. So if fun plus UI equals revenue, it's my suggestion that for a few weeks, maybe 2 weeks at the beginning of your project, once you have your high concept, you put the fun part aside, you say, let's have faith we're going to be able to make a fun game here, and let's prove our business model out first. So first step is, what are the things I look at for early stage design? And right now, unfortunately, I don't have templates to share with you like the ones, like the forecast one. If you go to my website, there are some templates, but they're pretty outdated, and I want to refresh them in the next couple weeks. But so what am I looking for first? So I'll talk you through this at a high level, and in the future I'll share templates with the world. So first, you'd have a game brief, you'd want to write a monetization strategy, you'd want to map out your core loops and your engagement patterns, and then, in my opinion, you're ready to start building your UI prototype. So for the case of this talk, I'm going to talk about a fictional game that I'd love to work on, but I expect I'll never get a chance to actually make, called Runnerlands. It's a cross between Borderlands and the Spider-Man Unlimited runner game that's pretty good. So that's the vision statement. You know, shoot and loot action RPG plus infinite runner. The key features are that it's a shooter, there's a loot engine, there's crafting, there's item fusion, squads, there's premium chests, PvP events, GVG events. So basically, if you take your standard mid-core game, where you have a base and timers and loot fusion, and then separately you have some gameplay, it's taking that standard game and adding a runner with the shooting element. And the target player is an 18 to 34 mid-core gamer. Then I'd write a monetization strategy which focuses on what emotions are we monetizing with, what does the product catalog look like, what does the player life cycle look like for early, mid, you know, what are the retention features for early gamers, mid gamers, and elder gamers, and what is our content strategy over time that will allow our game to grow and our audience to grow with our game. So that, you know, I could do a whole session on just those two, but that's for a future date. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll run through this as quickly as possible. So the next thing I'd do is I would map out my engagement loops. And basically this is trying to take the key elements of the game and map them out and highlight what are my sinks and taps and what are, you know, where's the player spending money. So in these, anything highlighted in green is where they spend money. So a player runs and guns, they craft items, and they earn craftables, and they earn gear, and they spend time and money to craft items and to fuse items so they can get more powerful gear, so they can take on better monsters, so they can get better craftables, so that they can make better gear, so they can take on better monsters. So this is the first level of engagement loop. Second level is once I have one hero, I have multiple heroes, and there's a unique incentive system for multiple heroes. The next engagement loop up after that is that once a player has their stable of multiple heroes that they run and gun with, then they do a PvP event system where they spend some form of special PvP event to earn unique PvP rewards. And then one step up from that would be GVG events and GVG rewards. And, you know, that's a lot of data, but it's, you know, it's just mapping out the engagement loops. I also like to try and look at what those engagement loops look like over time. So I said you have your early gamer, and if you look at a week, those basic gameplay features are what's going to keep them coming back day after day. And then the next level up from that is going to be the daily missions that they're going to get that incentivize them with a big reward if they do a specific set of actions each day. And then as they get into the mid-game, they're going to be incentivized by these mid-level squad runs, these squad events that are 3-day events that take place over twice a week. And then once they start to become an elder player, they're going to start participating in PvP tournaments that are week-long events with high stakes and high rewards that drive engagement and monetization. And then once they become a real elder player, there's going to be guild versus guild events, you know, limited time 1-day or 3-day events every weekend that are huge drivers for revenue and monetization. Okay, so now I've mapped out my engagement loops. I've mapped out what the player engagement looks like over time. And so what am I going to do? This is where where the rubber meets the road, where I'm just going to start to prototype the UI. So, as I said, this isn't about final quality UI visuals. This is about, in a week or two, taking all this game design I've done and visualizing the flows in order to see if the business model holds together or not, if I assume the game is fun. So for this game, and you know, this is, for me, this is a level of visuals that's kind of good enough, or close to good enough. Like, here's what my home screen would look like, and this has got my promos and my daily events and my daily missions, and you can see links to the major sections here, chests and crafting and fusing gear, and this is where I find my squad runs and my PvP events and my guild events. And you know, here's a mission loadout screen that let's say I click this purple box, I would see my mission and what the rewards are and how hard it is, and give the option to go fuse my gear or go fight the mission. And then this is the part where I'm telling you, just have some confidence. Don't prototype the gameplay. Just put up a screen that says fun goes here. And then after the fun, they would actually, you would program in some actual reward payouts in terms of XP and levels and gear and craftables and items. This is a victory screen, and from there you would go back to the promo screen, but the player could also go to the chest screen and use the keys that they've earned to actually unlock chests. They could go to the crafting screen, and this is a super ugly implementation. Like, this is nothing that I'd ever put in the game, but, you know, this rough look at a crafting screen and a rough look at a gear fusion screen. And the idea is that once I've sketched all these out, to actually put all these into Flash or put them into GameMaker or Unity and actually make it interactive, allow players to click from screen to screen, actually have real economic inputs and outputs, and then also add time modeling. So like a timer would count up any time the player was in a menu. Levels would have attached to them rough time to play. So if you're looking at a game like Injustice, Gods Among Us, a level might be 2 minutes long. If you're looking at a game like Vainglory, a game might be 22 minutes long. And then also you would give real timers to any time sinks in the game, like when you're crafting, and you would give fast-forward buttons. And the idea is that if you build this prototype, you can simulate a week or a month of actual gameplay in a very fast manner, taking into account various play patterns, and take a look at, you know, are the sinks and taps working? Are we presenting the player the ability to spend money regularly? Is there a compelling reason to spend? Is the player going to be cleanly funneled into the Elder games? And so all those critical questions that tie back into the questions you generated from forecasting early on, you have to answer with this business model prototype. You can answer everything except is the game fun. So then, to take this one step even further, the in-context game design document. So something that I've thought about a lot over the past couple months is game design documents. In a large part, my job is people hire me to read their game design documents and play their prototypes and look at their UI flows and point out issues months before they're implemented. And I've read in the past year hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of game design document. And what I've noticed, and obviously there are a lot of well-known issues and reasons why people hate game design documents. They're big and cumbersome. They go out of date quickly. No one takes the time to read them. They're not good visual communication tools. And since I just spent 30 minutes talking about why I think you need to prototype the UI layer, this is especially important here, is that I've noticed that if I'm faced with a 300-page game design document, and this is a page from an actual design document I've written, all of the critical information about how a game monetizes are in this UI screen and in the linkages between the different UI screens. But if I'm reading this document, I gloss over the visual as quickly as possible and just read the text. And I think that that is one of the reasons why I spot a lot of obvious low-hanging fruit that people just don't notice because of what a poor communication tool this is. So I thought a lot about annotated text and about actually reading Shakespeare in high school, and these annotated textbooks I'd read where the right side of every page was Shakespeare's text from the play, which was, you know, I didn't understand half the words in it. And Chris, yeah, I'm okay running over time. So on the right side of the page, you'd get the actual play, and on the left side of the play, you'd get definitions and other cultural information that was relevant for a modern person to actually understand what was going on. And I thought, well, how can we take this idea of annotated text and merge it with the game design document to make this thing more useful? So if I go back to one of the screens I was looking at, imagine I had a button in my prototype that I could press and turn on all these little orange info buttons. So I'm looking at my UI prototype. I'm looking at my game's business model visually, and I press a button and I get all these info buttons. And if I click any one of them, imagine that my game design document wiki actually pops up on top of the prototype, and I am able to view the actual design document that was linked to from this specific item. So instead of this weird reverse process where I'm reading all this text in a linear fashion and then occasionally seeing screens, and then months later I'll see it in the game, imagine how powerful it would be if I'm basically viewing an ugly version of the game, and from my understanding of it visually, I can then pop out to the high-level design and view the design. And it's my feeling that if you present all the design elements in context, if you communicate visually first and with text second, and you focus not on static screens but on actual flows of information, you will experience your game's monetization design months before it's ever implemented. You will spot obvious errors and you will be able to fix them well before you get into the implementation phase of your game. And so that's my idea. That's how it's something I'm going to start working on in the next couple months, and hopefully I'll have more that I'll be able to present publicly. But this is what I think, how we can improve our design tools to help us address monetization design earlier and to help us basically design games that monetize better. And so that is my talk. I'm happy now to take any questions from the audience, and you can email me, ethan@FamousAspect.com, follow me on Twitter, and there are plenty of articles, tools, templates, and previous talks on monetization on my site, FamousAspect.com. And with that, thank you for listening, and I'd like to take any, have a dialogue with whoever's here on the webinar.
Thank you so much, Ethan. That was really a brilliant mix of theory and practical application and homegrown tools to help people get through this whole thing. It's really, really, really great. Applause to you for that. Okay, I'm going to we have a, excuse me, a question here. So number one, I'll just jump into the easy question first. Michael Morris asks, are these slides available? I'm guessing they are. So
I believe that there's going to be a video of this on the IGDA YouTube channel sometime soon.
That's correct.
Also, March 4th, I'm presenting this at GDC, and after I present it, I will, with updated slides, there will be the latest version of slides and audio on my site. So if you want, the best thing to do is just email me and say, hey, when the slides are ready, can you send me a link? And I'll be happy to. Or just follow me on Twitter, and you'll get the latest slides. I used to put the slides up on SlideShare, and I don't anymore because I feel like they're not very valuable out of context. So now I'll focus just on getting the video up on YouTube as quickly as possible after GDC.
Okay. You're very generous with your assets. I really appreciate that. Hey, why don't you go ahead and leave, if you want to leave your slide up there for contact info, that's great. That's pretty much what I was gonna put up. Okay, so Chase had asked earlier, are there any monetization store items, categories of items that people think are profitable in white hat but turn out to underperform? I heard Spryfox guys say that aesthetic upgrades made up only a small part of their revenue. Also, one-time boosts are not very profitable either. So that, yeah, this is good stuff.
Yeah. So I would say, in my experience, vanity items vanity items are the things that, like, when people say we're going to do free-to-play right, they say we're only going to do vanity items, and then they find out in execution that basically, you know, it works for, you know, skins work for League of Legends because League of Legends have a massive audience. But in general, vanity items have a very low conversion rate overall, and usually only make up a very small percentage of anyone's overall monetization profile. So yeah, that's a good one to you know, it's not that you shouldn't have vanity items, it's that you shouldn't, unless you believe that your game can get 50 million users, you shouldn't focus only on vanity items. Consumable boosts, if designed properly, can be huge revenue drivers. Something that, you know, to go back to something that I've talked about a lot publicly is that if you sell only permanent goods, you can basically hobble your game's ability to monetize. That happened to me personally with Dragon Age Legends. Was like, we were selling $13 swords. We were generating revenue with them. We thought we were doing great, but the problem was if somebody bought a $13 sword once, at level 8, they might not need to buy another $14 sword till level 40. And not a lot of players stuck around that long. And that overall I would have been much happier, I think, with the game's performance had we sold those very powerful swords for 3 battles for a quarter, then sold them permanently for $14. And to go to the larger issue, basically it is my advice that in most scenarios you don't sell only permanent goods and that you don't place a hard cap on the amount of money somebody can spend. It's okay to have some permanent goods, but if your most valuable user can only ever spend $50 in your game, when they may have wished to spend a couple $100s in your game over the course of 9 months or 12 months, given the right consumable design, that, you know, there was a great article years ago from Age of Empires Online where they said initially they had a $75 cap, like that was the most you could possibly spend in the game, and excuse me, that almost led to their product's failure, and it was only by removing that cap and kind of removing the idyllic version of free-to-play were they able to be successful for a period of time.
Yeah, I've often I introduce what I call the millionaire class of items in the games, which are usually a combination of functionality with a high aesthetic factor for those very few people who want to spend a lot of money and just have it there. And it sort of enriches the game experience typically for all players to see at least one person running around with, you know, a gold-plated, shiny, whatever. It's just it's aspirational. It's kind of cool to see that, and it gives people who want to spend a lot of money the ability to spend the money if that's what they want to do. Okay, another question, follow-up question from Michael. What are the statistics on a free-to-play monetization model of character customization and unlocking weapons?
That is, I mean, that's a pretty broad question. I feel like I can't quite answer that, I guess.
Yeah, so, I mean, he's asking for statistics, but what's your, I guess maybe it'd be more like, what's your sense of pursuing those kinds of strategies?
I mean, there's a game that I like a lot. Well, 2 games I like a lot. One is Eternity Warriors, Eternity Warriors 3 by Glue. One is Injustice: God Among Us. Both of those use that sort of model in some form or another, and both of those have been top 100 grossing games, top 50 grossing games. And there are plenty of games that have done those things and don't do anything. So back to what I was talking about with, you know, have faith that you can develop fun. it depends largely, it's that combination of features and fun together, right? I could design the best monetization features possible on a game that wasn't any good and it would fail. Or, conversely, there can be a game that's tons of fun with terrible monetization features that will also fail. So, just as a high concept, it's a great high concept. There's plenty of success cases out there, but it's all about your execution. It's about your execution and then about market conditions and blind luck.
Yes, also the case. There's something that I've run across that I don't think has come up in the conversation so far, which is making it really easy. I mean, you've touched on it a little bit, but making it easy for your players to spend money, right? Mm-hmm. And having those elements in front of you, but also having a good flow that doesn't require them to say enter a 16-digit, credit card number every single time they want to buy a pack of gum. That you can do that, right? So there's a cost benefit analysis every time a player wants to purchase something. Mm-hmm. Where and that's why a lot of the games will have people purchase packs of coins, in-game currency, so that they just sort of have those coins in their pocket, and so that when they see something they want, it's really easy to just spend it. It's literally like one or two clicks, right? And then you've taken the lengthy part of validating the credit card or whatever, put that into like a one-time action or like a less often action, so that they can then continue to consume those things. Just spending the coins as they get to it. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, something to go back to my mantras. Making purchasing present is my big one. And what that means, so like one of my best success stories is not from a client, but from a friend that I actually worked with, or just like had coffee with. Makes a game called Hit Tennis 3, and this is years ago, where we had coffee and he showed me his game, and it was out on iOS and maybe Android, and they were about to release the iPad version of the game. And what I noticed was that the core loop of the game was see a story screen of the player I'm about to face in a match of tennis, play a match of tennis, story screen, tennis, story screen, tennis. Separately, outside of that core loop, there was the ability to spend the currency that I was earning on consumable items. So the consumables were already in the game, but they were off the path. And while we were having coffee, I said, there's plenty of room on the story screen. Why don't you take this over here, build it into a widget, and put it down here, so that every time before they're about to play a round of tennis, they see the ability to buy their consumables. And it was a really nice A/B test where a couple weeks later they launched the iPad version. The iPad version had that suggestion in, and I got an email that said that in-app purchases were up 80% iPad version relative to previous version. And what they had done was taking something they were already selling and not blocking the player's progress, but putting it into the standard flow. So, if you go to pocketgamer.biz, I just wrote an article on Midnight Star that's all about this, just little UI tips, but like making purchasing present is the thing I probably spend the majority of my effort on post-launch games.
Absolutely spot on. Okay, so does anybody have any more questions? We're at 10 minutes after the hour. How are people feeling about this? Let's see. Any more questions for Ethan? I'll give it another couple of minutes or another minute or so, because it can take time to formulate a good question. There we go. All right, well, people are seem to be just basically saying, repeating what I think, which is this is a really great presentation, and anybody who gets to see this at GDC is going to be really lucky. This is, as you say, this is this is a part of the modern game designer job umbrella, is to think about how to incorporate these kinds of elements into the game experience. And you can't just let the producer come waltzing in and say, oh, by the way, all of a sudden we need to think about that monetizing. Putting it up front and dedicating the right amount of time to it and making sure that that works right is the way that we do this as professionals. This is really, really excellent about that. All right, well, I am going to draw the curtain down, I think, on this. Thank you very much, Ethan. That was a really great presentation. And
Thank you.
Anybody have anything else to say? Did I hear something? No.
No.
Okay.
Thank you,
right,
everybody, for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. So every week at this time, the IGDA has a webinar on a different subject, and we've got the game design. We go ahead and take the control back here. I'm going to make me the presenter. I'm going to take that back. But okay, great. So next month, so every month we have a game design webinar. It's the third Wednesday of the month. If you have any suggestions, questions, love letters, send them to webinars at igda.org, and you can go to the igda.org/webinars page for more information about upcoming webinars. Thank you very much, and as we said, this video will be on YouTube on the IGDA channel at some point in the future. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.